You're not getting better in your workouts. You're not reaching your goals because you're doing the wrong exercises. In today's episode, I'm going to be covering why you should be leaning in to the things that you suck at. The things that you're not good at, the things that cause you aches and pains, are the exact exercises that you need to be doing in order to achieve your goals. Because when you avoid exercises like deadlifts because they cause back pain, or when you avoid shoulder pressing because it causes shoulder pain, these are the things that are preventing you from achieving your goals. And something that I see way too often is people saying, I can't do this exercise, so can I do this one instead? But the exercises that you can't do, that you feel are too challenging for you, or that you feel cause aches and pains, are the exact thing that you need to be doing more of. Because we've all got a history of injury, of imbalances, of things that have developed over our life, especially if you're like me and you're over the age of 40. I turned 47 this year. So there's a big history of mistakes that we've made in the past where we've either injured ourselves and then we haven't rehabilitated ourselves properly, or we've avoided injuries, we've avoided exercises because we just couldn't do them well, or because we had a bad experience with them. And so then we think, well, that exercise isn't good for me, so I'm going to do this one instead. And so I'm going to go through some of the main exercises that I see people avoiding because they say it causes them pain or they're not good at them, and the exact reason why you should be doing them. So if we start with one of the first things that I see really often in our online coaching is people ask if they can use a Smith machine for any of their exercises. Like people will say, can I use the Smith machine for my squats or for my deadlifts or for my chest pressing or for my shoulder pressing? And I don't use the Smith machine for anything. And I recommend that people avoid the Smith machine like the plague. And there's many, many good reasons why. And I haven't seen any valid reasons as to why people would use a Smith machine. And the reason why is because the Smith machine is a fixed plane of motion. It cannot move outside of the plane of motion that it's set in. And so it feels much easier when you do an exercise because it just goes straight up and straight down. And that is a real problem because it completely robs your body from the need for it to stabilize itself during exercise. So if we take a chest press, for example, the Smith machine just moves straight up and straight down. It cannot move out of that range of motion. And what that means is that your shoulders don't need to stabilize themselves to make sure that the weight isn't moving outside of the optimal plane of motion. And what's funny as well is that when you actually do a bench pressing is one of the movements where the barbell doesn't move directly up and down. When you look at a proper bench press, the bar will actually, as you come down, the bar will come forward, because when you're in the locked out position, the bar sits above your shoulders, but when you're in the lowered position, the bar sits on your sternum. So it actually moves laterally, this much between the plane of where your shoulders are and where your sternums are. And that's because of the way that the humerus moves in the shoulder and the way that you want to always keep the wrists above the elbows. So when you're doing chest pressing or bench pressing with a Smith machine, you're not even using the correct plane of motion. So if you think that any kind of bench pressing causes you, discomfort or aches or pains, but when you use the Smith machine, you don't feel that. The Smith machine is stopping you from ever making progress with the bench press. And the solution is to learn how to do the bench press properly and to address the issues that are going on within your shoulders that are causing discomfort when you're doing the bench press. So there's multiple different ways that we do that. And I've covered that in many different episodes before. We need to work on strengthening the scapular stabilizers. We need to work on strengthening the rotator cuff. You need to work on unilateral strength as well. So that's another thing that the Smith machine does terribly, even worse than a barbell, where if you've got one side that's stronger than the other side, the Smith machine, you can really, do the majority of work on that strong side. But if you do dumbbell chest pressing, for example, you're forced to use each side equally and individually. So whatever the dumbbell is in each hand has to move that dumbbell on its own. So That's an example with chest pressing. With shoulder pressing, it's the same thing. Shoulder pressing, we have the same concerns with the Smith machine. With a deadlift, the deadlift itself is an incredible movement, and the problem that people have more often than not with a deadlift is that they don't understand how to keep the barbell over their center of weight distribution. So basically over the center of the feet. And what happens is that when you deviate from that central position, so if the barbell comes forward a couple of inches over the toes when you're lifting, then you dramatically increase the lateral force on your spine, which causes a lot of pain and discomfort. But if that's happening for you, the solution isn't to avoid the deadlift because you think the deadlift is causing you problems, even though the deadlift is causing you pain and discomfort. The solution is to lean into the deadlift and learn how to do it properly. And so if you think to yourself, well, no, deadlifts cause me issues in my back, I'm going to do other exercises, I'm going to do hip thrusts, or, a common one that I get is deadlifts always cause me discomfort, so I'd rather use the Roman chair. Back extensions, hyperextensions. Although back extensions and hyperextensions are great exercises, they're not a replacement for the deadlift. Like the deadlift is a fundamental movement pattern. And, if I deviate a little bit, movements that everybody should be working on getting better at, the 7 fundamental lifts. So squat, bench press, row, shoulder press, pull up, deadlift, and split squat. Those are fundamental movement patterns that are like the foundation for all other free weight gym training. And if any of those exercises cause you, there is of course always going to be some rare circumstances where people would need to avoid certain exercises in an earlier phase of training, but the goal should always be to work up towards doing those exercises. And you can insert almost any exercise here and say this exercise causes me issues, or I'm not good at it. And what happens is with the average gym goer, when they're not working with a coach who's guiding them to make the right decisions and to follow a program that's going to inherently create structural balance in the body, fix aches and pains, and get them to their goals, is that when they realize that they can't do an exercise well, even if it's not causing pain, people often, it's the ego that plays in, where they try and do an exercise with their friends and they can't do it well. And so their ego says, well, I can't do this exercise. I'm going to do this one because I can do it well. And then what happens as time goes by, as you get better at these exercises that you're already good at, but you're neglecting the exercises that you're not good at, one day, those bad decisions just are like shining in your face so strong that you just can't hide from it. So a common thing that you'll see with people is that they just can't do pull-ups. They've been going to the gym for ages, but no matter how long they've been going to the gym, they can't do pull-ups. And if you bring it back to the earlier stages of training, it's because people go and try a pull-up, they can't do a pull-up, and so they just ignore it. And then they favor things like lat pull downs or whatever other exercise to train their upper body, instead of addressing the reason why they can't do a pull-up and following structured programming that would unlock a pull-up, like starting with feet-assisted pull-ups, doing top range holds, doing eccentric pull-ups, doing jumping pull-ups, and working up towards being able to do a pull-up. And the further you go down the journey, the better you get at your gym training, but the pull-up still remains something that you can never do. And if you realize that you can't do something, and you lean into that, why can't I do this? And because good training is about addressing the weak links in your body and turning them into strengths. So, when we write programs at Unity Gym with the Unified Movement System, we're looking for what the weaknesses are in people, and we're leaning into them. And all of our members that have been with us for a while, that have had these incredible breakthroughs, that are writing us these 5-star reviews, it's from a coach's perspective, it's a really simple thing, or at least a coach that understands progressive overload, periodization, and structural balance training. When we see something that somebody can't do, we teach them how to regress the movement. So regressing either with complexity by going to a version of the exercise that's easier to do, but still moves them towards their end goal of where they want to be. So the example of the pull-up that I just gave, where you can't do a pull-up, so you do feet-assisted pull-ups or eccentric reps or jumping pull-ups or whatever it is. And you program in a way that brings them closer and closer to their goals. Or when you realize that a movement is, that they're so weak in a movement that the regression that we have to do is with the intensity. So often we see this with trap 3 raises. So a trap 3 raise is where there's multiple versions, but the one we start with, where you're bent over at a 45-degree angle, you're holding your weight down here, you retract and depress your scapula, raise your arm up, and then lower down slowly. And what this is doing is it's developing strength in the mid and lower trapezius and the rhomboids. And what we see is that often people have an imbalance between the upper trapezius, so this part of the trapezius up here, and the mid and lower trapezius, where the upper trapezius is more dominant. And there's many, many reasons why that happens. And when there's that imbalance between where the mid and lower trapezius is weaker than the upper trapezius, that means that the shoulder is prone to injury. And so when we see people go to do a trap 3 raise, often even just with 1 pound or half a kilogram of weight, they can't do it with correct technique. Their elbow bends, their body twists when they try and do it. And when you're not being guided properly, the mistake that I see people make all the time is that they think, well, I can't do this exercise, so I'm going to do something else. That's not the solution. The solution to becoming pain-free, the solution to be able to unlock chest-to-bar pull-ups, to be able to do pain-free shoulder pressing, is to get better at the trap 3 raise, because you have an imbalance in your body that is so prominent that you can't even do this exercise with the lightest weight possible. And there's many, many ways to work with that. But the key message is, don't avoid that exercise. Lean into it until you get better at it. And sometimes that process takes 3 to 6 months of just working on this one exercise until your body really starts to develop it. And part of the reason why that is that often it's the neuromuscular connection that's really, really weak, which means that the connection between the brain, the nervous system, and the muscle is so weak that even when you tell yourself, do this movement, the brain isn't able to contract the muscles properly. If you imagine that the neuromuscular connection, so the brain says, let's move, and it sends a signal through the nervous system to contract a muscle. And if you imagine that signal, that pathway, the neuromuscular connection, is a hose, and the signal that's going from the brain to the muscle is the water traveling through the hose. And what happens is there's a kink in the hose. So the brain's sending the signal, but it's hitting the kink, and only a tiny part of that signal is getting through to the muscle to contract it. And so when you're in the earlier stages of strengthening a weak link, you're not hypertrophying the muscle. You're not making the muscle bigger. What you're doing is you're getting this kink out of the hose so that at least the message that's going from the brain through the nervous system to the muscle is actually getting there, and it's actually contracting the muscle. So I've had a couple of questions here that I'm just going to quickly answer before they get lost through. So Hellenic Warrior is saying, opinion on hollow pull-ups, brother. Hope you're doing great. Hollow pull-ups where you contract the abs, I don't use them. They have their reason for it, but the pull-up is an exercise to develop strength in the upper body, and there's many more reasons to instead extend the upper back. So to extend the thoracic spine so that you get better contraction, better lat activation in the pull-up. That's what they call the perfect pull-up, where you're extended in your spine. So yeah, I know that people use hollow pull-ups. I don't use them personally. I haven't found a good reason to use those over the pull-up technique that you see me teaching in my videos. Football W Wizard is saying, is it good to use protein and whey? Absolutely, yeah. If you want to optimize muscle growth, if you want to get as much muscle growth as you can in your training, then there's so much research that shows you want to be aiming for 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, or 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. And unless you want to, like, if you look at the way bodybuilders eat, man, it's like a full-time job, and it's not something that I'm interested in doing. So I use whey protein isolate, and I have between 2 and 4 serves of whey protein isolate a day, because that gives me between 50 and 100 grams of protein a day, which means that I only need to get 100 to 150 grams of protein from food, which means that I need to eat a lot less meat and fish and chicken and stuff like that. And so that works really well for me. And it's also a lot cheaper, a lot more cost effective. So yes, I think that's a really good idea. So when you're following a program, when you've got a program that's been written for you by a coach that really knows what they're doing, and that you've put your faith in, and that you know that I've got this goal, I've come to this coach because I'm here and I haven't been able to get past this glass ceiling. This isn't, I just, no matter how hard I try, no matter how dedicated I am to my workouts, no matter how many new programs I try, I haven't been able to get there. And I've started working with this coach because they've been able to produce these results in themselves and in other people. And I believe that they're going to be able to get me there. Then when you get exercises that you can't do, or that cause you frustration, or that cause you discomfort, work with the coach, communicate with them, try to understand, how can I do this exercise better? Let them know what you're going through, but don't avoid the exercises. Don't think that you're going to default back to, like, one of the biggest mistakes that I see new members make when they start with our UMS online coaching is that they say, I really like doing this exercise and this exercise works well for me. Can I replace that with this? That's one of the worst things that you can do, because doing the same thing that you've gotten used to is going to prevent your development, your adaptation. And the reason why you hit a glass ceiling is because whatever you're doing that worked for you in the past, you will always plateau from doing the same thing over and over again eventually. So, doing something new, something that you haven't yet done that is in your program now, is the thing that you need to be doing to break through and get to that new level. Hellenic Warrior is saying, hang on, what's been said back here? About this for protein, I eat 300 grams of protein per day and 100 grams of fat and 200 grams of carbs. My testosterone levels went from 800 to 1,150. I recover better, but I just get my protein from meat, not whey. Cool. If that works well for you, man, go for it. I can't imagine how much meat you must be eating to be having 300 grams of protein a day. I couldn't eat that much. It's just way too much. And then Hellenic Warrior is saying, your advice about training is amazing. I ask about hollow pulls because people say that arching the back does compress the rib cage. Maybe. Everybody that I've worked with that is really, really good at pull-ups, and what's allowed me to be able to get as good as I am at pull-ups, uses the technique that I teach. So I definitely believe in it, and hollow pull-ups are not something that I have used to get to where I am. So guys, look, you really want to be smart about avoiding the exercises that you aren't good at, because the exercises that you aren't good at are the greatest opportunity for growth. And the exercises that you're already really good at, if you're just going to keep doing more of them, there's very little room for growth. So when you're working with a coach and the coach writes you a program where you go, wow, I suck at this exercise, look at it as a really exciting thing. Go, wow, this is an opportunity for growth, because this is something that I've been neglecting, that I didn't even know I needed. And now I've been given a program that's giving me this amazing room for growth, and lean into those exercises that you aren't good at, because I guarantee you they're your biggest opportunity for growth. And if you're somebody who is struggling to break through plateaus, if you feel like you're stuck and you can't get through to that next level, then I guarantee you that structural balance training, where we balance left to right side, symmetry, so we work on balancing left and right side, make sure you don't have one side that's stronger than the other, where we balance pushing and pulling so that there's an equal, there's a relative strength ratio between pushing and pulling in your arms and your legs, where we balance inner and outer units, so inner unit being the deep stabilizer muscles like the rotator cuff, scapular stabilizers, and outer unit being the prime movers like the big muscles like pecs, deltoids, biceps, triceps, lats. When we balance those ratios well, when we balance strength and flexibility so that you're not really strong, but you can't touch your toes, or you're not super flexible, but you can't, do a single pull-up, or you can't squat your own body weight. And when we balance upper and lower body strength as well, when you do a program like that, you will be amazed at the breakthroughs that you have. And if you want to get that done for you, come and join my online coaching. Go to unitygym.com. Hellenic Warrior is saying Roy Goldsmith said that to me. Do you mean Roy Goldschmidt? Is that who you're talking about? Roy Goldschmidt was my coach for 2 years. I worked with him for 2 years with online coaching. So I know his teachings very, very well. And he's had a big impact on the way that I train. Is that who you're talking about? And what did he say to you? I'm not sure what you're referring to. Oh, you're talking about the arch pull-up. Yep. There's reasons to do it. I don't know what you mean by hollow body, because the technique that I teach with pull-ups is the technique that I learned from Roy. Roy taught me a different technique with pull-ups than I'd learned from anybody else, and I would not call it a hollow pull-up at all. The idea is that when you get to the top of the bar, that you do allow the shoulders to protract at the top, but at the bottom you absolutely initiate with depression and retraction in the scapula. Vibjorn is saying, when it comes to strength, should pushing and pulling movements push-pull equal weight? No, they shouldn't equal weight. The weights will be slightly different with the amount that you can push and pull, but the ratio of the way that you train those movements should be balanced. And later on in the UMS, Vibjorn, you will have an opportunity to do strength testing, where we have ratios that the bench press should be to the row and that the shoulder press should be to the pull-up. And you'll have an opportunity to test those later. And then the results of what you find in those testing will allow me to further customize your program. But we don't do that for new members. For people that are in their first 12 months of UMS training, we get through 12 months of training first, because the first thing that anybody needs to be able to do is to maximize technique in all of the fundamental lifts and the supplementary lifts, things like trap 3 raise, external rotation, step ups, and several other exercises as well. And the reason why is because when technique optimization isn't dialed in, your strength testing results will be completely inaccurate. And so it's a complete waste of time for somebody that doesn't have very good technique and hasn't worked on the basics of structural balance first. And then when somebody gets to that more advanced stage, that's when we can start doing the hyper-focused strength training and program design. So that's something that we do in the UMS for our members that have been with us for 12 months or more. So, Hellenic Warrior is saying he's amazing. The spinal flowing, he does waves, and those stuff are amazing. Now I know why your technique is on point. Yeah, I worked with Roy for 2 years with online personal training, and it was great. It was an incredible experience. I learned a lot from it. However, the amount of time required to do his full program, even as a fitness professional that has far more time available to be able to train than the average person, I found it to be unrealistic to be able to do long term. It's just, it is like a second job, ma'am. And for somebody like me, who's a father and who runs a business, it was just unmanageable to meet the expectations of the amount of time that you train. 2 sessions a day. Some sessions were well over 2 hours. And even the shortest session was about 90 minutes. It's just an insane amount of training. So there we go. I hope you guys got something out of that. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It really helps the algorithm to get our content out there, and I put a lot of effort into to give you guys good content that helps you with your training. And the one thing that you can do is hit that subscribe button. Really helps us to get this stuff out. And I hope you guys got something out of that. And anything that you want me to answer on these live streams, let me know. And I will see you on my next live stream in 2 days on Thursday. Have a wonderful day, everybody.